Family loyalty, sacrifice, trust. These are the foundations we build our lives upon. But what happens when those very foundations crumble in a single afternoon? When the people we trust most betray us in the most unexpected way? Today's story takes us into the life of Sarah Mitchell, a 42-year-old single mother from Denver, Colorado, who made an extraordinary sacrifice for her son. She cancelled a vacation she had been planning for over a year, worked double shifts for 6 months, and gave up every small luxury in her life to reward her teenage son with something he had earned through dedication and hard work. What should have been a moment of pure joy turned into a nightmare that would tear her family apart and force her to make a decision that would cost her everything she held dear. This is a story about boundaries, accountability, and the devastating moment when you realize that blood relation doesn't always mean family. The question that haunted Sarah, and will haunt you after hearing this story, is simple yet profound. How far would you go to defend what's right, even if it means losing everyone you love? Sarah Mitchell had always been a fighter. Divorced at 38, she found herself suddenly responsible for raising her son Dylan alone in their modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet Denver suburb. The neighborhood was quintessentially middle-class American, with tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, and the kind of community where neighbors still waved at each other. But behind the neat facade of her brick house, with its white shutters and small front porch, Sarah was working herself to exhaustion. Her primary job as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company paid the bills, barely, so she took on a second job, working evenings and weekends at a retail store in the shopping district downtown. Every morning began at 5:30. She would prepare breakfast for Dylan, make sure he was ready for school, then drive 40 minutes through Denver's increasingly congested traffic to her office. Her days were filled with paperwork, phone calls, and the monotonous rhythm of corporate life. But at 5 o'clock, while most of her colleagues headed home, Sarah would grab a quick sandwich and drive another 20 minutes to her retail job, where she would stand behind a counter until 10 at night, dealing with demanding customers and aching feet. Dylan, now 16 years old, was everything Sarah could have hoped for in a son. While many teenagers in the neighborhood were getting into trouble, experimenting with substances, or failing in school, Dylan was different. He maintained a 4.0 grade average. He was respectful, responsible, and mature beyond his years. He understood his mother's sacrifices and never asked for anything extravagant. But Sarah noticed something. Dylan had developed a passion for mountain biking. He would spend hours watching videos online, studying techniques, learning about different trails in the Colorado mountains. He had an old, beat-up bike that he had bought second-hand with money from his part-time job at a local grocery store. But it was barely functional. The gears stuck, the brakes were unreliable, and it certainly wasn't suitable for the challenging terrain he dreamed of conquering. One evening in February, as snow blanketed the Denver streets and the temperature dropped below freezing, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a calculator, her bank statement spread before her. She had been planning a vacation to the Gulf Coast for over a year. It was going to be her first real break in 4 years. 5 days of sunshine, warm beaches, and the luxury of doing absolutely nothing. The vacation would cost approximately $4,000, including flights, hotel, and expenses. As she looked at the numbers, an idea began to form. Dylan's 17th birthday was approaching in May. What if, instead of taking that vacation, she used that money to buy him something truly special, a professional-grade mountain bike that could last him years, that could take him safely through the trails he dreamed of exploring? Sarah knew it was an extravagant gift by any standard. $4,000 for a bicycle might seem absurd to some people, but to her it represented something deeper. It was an investment in Dylan's passion, a reward for his exceptional character, and a way of showing him that hard work and integrity do pay off in life. The decision wasn't easy. She had been fantasizing about that vacation for months, imagining herself on a beach chair with a novel, listening to the waves, feeling the sun on her skin. But as she looked at Dylan's school report card on the refrigerator, covered in A-plus grades, and remembered how he had never once complained about their modest lifestyle or his mother's absence during her long work hours, the choice became clear. She cancelled the vacation. The travel agent was sympathetic but firm about the cancellation fees. Sarah lost $300 immediately, but she didn't care. She began researching bikes obsessively. She joined online forums, read countless reviews, and consulted with experts at local bike shops. Finally, she found it. A top-of-the-line Trek mountain bike, professional grade, with advanced suspension, hydraulic disc brakes, and a lightweight carbon frame. It was exactly $4,200. Sarah worked extra shifts. She skipped lunches. She cut every unnecessary expense from her budget. By late April, she had the money. She visited the bike shop on a Saturday morning when Dylan was at his grocery store job. The owner, a weathered man in his 50s named Tom, who had been mountain biking for 30 years, personally helped her select the perfect model. When Tom heard the story behind the purchase, he was moved. He threw in a professional helmet, gloves, and a maintenance kit at no extra charge. He also spent an hour teaching Sarah about basic bike maintenance so she could help Dylan care for his new treasure. The bike was stunning. Matte black with silver accents, it looked like something a professional athlete would ride. Tom helped her load it carefully into her SUV, wrapped in protective blankets. Dylan's birthday fell on a Saturday in mid-May. Sarah had planned everything perfectly. She woke him up early and told him they were going to spend the day together, maybe drive up to one of the mountain trails he always talked about. Dylan was thrilled just at the prospect of spending uninterrupted time with his mother, something that had become increasingly rare with her demanding schedule. They had breakfast together, pancakes with fresh berries, Dylan's favorite. Then Sarah told him she had something to show him in the garage. She had kept the bike hidden there, covered with an old tarp, for 3 days. When Dylan pulled off the tarp and saw the bike, his reaction was everything Sarah had hoped for and more. His eyes widened in disbelief. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch it, as if afraid it might disappear. He turned to his mother with tears in his eyes and asked if this was really his. Sarah simply nodded, her own eyes welling up with tears. Dylan wrapped his arms around his mother in a fierce hug and whispered thank you over and over. He asked how she could possibly afford something like this. Sarah simply told him that he had earned it through his dedication, his character, and his respect. She told him she was proud of the young man he was becoming, and that this was her way of showing him that sacrifices made with love and integrity always lead to beautiful rewards. That morning, they drove up to the foothills together. Dylan rode his new bike on a beginner trail while Sarah watched from a clearing, her heart full of a joy she hadn't felt in years. The Colorado sun was warm, the aspens were budding with new spring growth, and for a few perfect hours, everything in Sarah's world felt right. She had no idea that in less than 2 weeks, that perfect moment would be shattered by an act so thoughtless and destructive that it would change her family forever. Sarah's brother, Marcus, was 3 years younger than her and lived with his family about 45 minutes away in a suburb called Lakewood. Marcus worked as a sales manager for a car dealership and earned a comfortable 6-figure income. His wife, Jennifer, was a stay-at-home mother to their 3 children, Ethan, age 12, Olivia, age 10, and Lucas, age 8. The relationship between Sarah and Marcus had always been complicated. Growing up, Marcus had been the favored child, the golden boy who could do no wrong in their parents' eyes. Sarah, on the other hand, had been expected to be responsible, to take care of things, to not cause problems. This dynamic had continued into adulthood. When Sarah's marriage fell apart, Marcus had been the first to say, "I told you so." When she struggled financially, Marcus would make casual comments about better career choices and financial planning, despite having never faced real hardship himself. But they were family. They saw each other at holidays and occasional gatherings. Sarah made an effort to maintain the relationship, partly out of genuine love for her brother, partly out of obligation, and partly because she wanted Dylan to have a connection with his cousins. Marcus's children were, to put it diplomatically, challenging. Ethan, the oldest, had been suspended from school twice for bullying. Olivia was known among neighbors for temper tantrums that could last hours. Lucas had once destroyed a neighbor's garden because he thought it would be funny. But whenever anyone mentioned these incidents to Marcus or Jennifer, the response was always the same. Boys will be boys, kids will be kids. They're just spirited, they're expressing themselves. There was never discipline, there were never consequences. The children did as they pleased, and their parents either ignored the behavior or made excuses for it. On the last Saturday of May, Sarah decided to host a family barbecue. The weather was perfect, typical late spring in Denver, with temperatures in the mid-70s and brilliant sunshine. She had the day off from both jobs, a rare occurrence, and she wanted to celebrate Dylan's birthday properly with extended family. She invited Marcus and his family, along with her parents, Robert and Linda, who lived about an hour away. She spent Friday evening preparing, marinating chicken and ribs, making potato salad and coleslaw, cleaning the house and setting up the backyard with folding chairs and a checkered tablecloth on her old picnic table. Dylan was excited to show his cousins his new bike. Despite their behavioral issues, he tried to maintain a good relationship with them. He was that kind of kid, always seeing the best in people. Marcus's family arrived around noon. Jennifer was on her phone almost immediately, barely greeting Sarah before settling into a lawn chair and scrolling through social media. Marcus headed straight for the cooler and grabbed a beer. The three children piled out of their SUV and immediately began running around the yard, screaming at volumes that seemed impossible for human children to achieve. Sarah's parents arrived shortly after, and the afternoon began pleasantly enough. The adults gathered in the backyard while Sarah grilled. Dylan showed his grandfather the bike, and Robert, a retired construction worker who appreciated quality craftsmanship, was genuinely impressed. He commented on how thoughtful and generous Sarah had been, which earned a dismissive snort from Marcus. "What's that supposed to mean?" Sarah asked, her tone sharper than she intended. Marcus shrugged. "Just seems like an awful lot to spend on a bike. Could have put that money toward college savings or something practical." Sarah bit her tongue. This was typical Marcus, always finding a way to diminish her choices. She focused on the grill and changed the subject. The children ate quickly, barely sitting still long enough to finish their plates. Ethan complained loudly that the chicken was too spicy. Olivia dumped her entire plate of coleslaw onto the grass because she didn't like vinegar. Lucas threw pieces of bread at the neighbor's dog through the fence. Jennifer barely looked up from her phone. Marcus told them to calm down, but with no real authority, and predictably they ignored him completely. After lunch, the adults settled into conversation. Sarah's mother dominated the discussion with stories about her garden club. While Marcus started explaining a big sale he had made at the dealership, Dylan excused himself to go work on a school project in his room. He trusted his cousins around his things, a decision he would come to deeply regret. The three children, bored with the adult conversation and free from any supervision, began exploring. They wandered through the house, opening cabinets, touching things that didn't belong to them. Jennifer, noticing they had gone inside, called out half-heartedly for them to behave, but made no move to actually supervise them. The garage door was unlocked. Sarah never locked it during gatherings. Dylan's bike was there, propped against the wall in a corner, gleaming even in the dim garage light. Next to it was a shelf where Sarah kept various household items, including several cans of spray paint left over from a furniture project she had done months ago. There were 5 colors: bright red, electric blue, neon green, hot pink, and yellow. What happened next would be described differently depending on who was telling the story. According to Ethan's later account, Lucas found the spray paint first and thought it would be fun to decorate the bike. Olivia would claim it was Ethan's idea. Lucas would say he didn't really remember who started it. He just went along. The truth was simpler and more damning. 3 children, aged 12, 10, and 8, old enough to absolutely know better, picked up spray paint cans and systematically vandalized a $4,000 bicycle. They sprayed it in chaotic patterns. Red zigzags across the frame, blue circles on the wheels, green handprints on the seat, pink spirals down the handlebars, yellow splatters everywhere. They used all 5 cans until they were empty. They added stickers they found on a nearby shelf, pressing them randomly across the painted surface. They drew stick figures with permanent markers on any remaining black surface they could find. The professional matte black and silver finish that had taken craftsmen hours to perfect was completely obliterated. The bike looked like a kindergarten art project gone horribly wrong. Worse, the spray paint had dripped into the mechanical components, gumming up the gears and coating the brake cables. The value of the bike had been reduced from over $4,000 to essentially nothing. Even if the paint could be removed, which was unlikely without damaging the frame, the internal damage from the paint meant it would need extensive professional repair. The children finished their work and simply walked away, leaving the empty spray paint cans on the garage floor. They returned to the backyard as if nothing had happened and asked Jennifer if they could have ice cream. It was Dylan who discovered what they had done. He had finished his homework and decided to take his bike for a quick ride around the neighborhood before dinner. He walked into the garage, and for a moment his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The bike that had been perfect and pristine just hours ago was destroyed, completely, utterly destroyed. The shock hit him like a physical blow. He stood frozen, staring at the ruined bicycle, trying to understand how this could have happened. Then he saw the empty spray paint cans on the floor. He noticed small paint splatters leading from the shelf toward the bike. He saw the permanent markers lying on the ground. And he understood exactly what had happened and who had done it. Dylan wasn't a kid who cried easily. He was 16, trying hard to be mature, to be a man. But in that moment, standing in the garage, looking at the destroyed symbol of his mother's sacrifice and love, tears streamed down his face. His hands shook. His breath came in short gasps. He felt something break inside him, not just disappointment, but a profound sense of injustice and violation. He walked slowly back toward the backyard, his face pale, his eyes red. Sarah saw him immediately and knew something was terribly wrong. She stood up quickly, her heart already racing. "Dylan, what happened?" she asked. Dylan couldn't speak. He just turned and walked back toward the garage. Sarah followed, her mind racing through possibilities. Had he been hurt? Had someone broken in? Her parents, Marcus and Jennifer, also began to follow, sensing the sudden tension. When Sarah entered the garage and saw the bike, she made a sound that she had never made before in her life. It was somewhere between a gasp and a sob, a noise of pure disbelief and devastation. She walked toward the bike slowly, her hand reaching out to touch it, as if touching it would somehow reveal this was all a terrible nightmare. The paint was still slightly wet. It was real. This had just happened within the last hour. Sarah turned to look at the gathering crowd behind her. Her parents looked shocked. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Jennifer was still on her phone. The 3 children stood near the garage door, and if Sarah had been looking for guilt or remorse on their faces, she would have been sorely disappointed. They looked curious, maybe slightly concerned about the adult reaction, but not guilty, not sorry. "Who did this?" Sarah asked, her voice unnaturally calm, that terrifying calm that comes right before a storm. The children were silent. Ethan looked at Olivia. Olivia looked at Lucas. Lucas looked at the ground. Sarah's voice rose. Who did this to Dylan's bike? Marcus stepped forward. Sarah, let's not jump to conclusions here. Not jump to conclusions, Sarah repeated, her voice now shaking. Marcus, there are 3 empty spray paint cans on my garage floor. My bike was fine 3 hours ago. Your children have been unsupervised. This isn't a conclusion. This is obvious fact. Jennifer finally looked up from her phone, her expression annoyed at being disturbed. Kids, did you paint Dylan's bike? The children's silence was answer enough. That's when Sarah felt something inside her snap. All the years of watching her brother's children destroy things without consequence. All the times she had bitten her tongue when they were rude or destructive. All the sacrifices she had made, the double shifts, the cancelled vacation, the 6 months of exhaustion to buy that bike. It all came crashing down in that moment. Marcus, she said, her voice now deadly quiet. Your children just destroyed a $4,000 bicycle that I worked 6 months to afford. They will replace it, or you will replace it, immediately. What happened next would be the beginning of a war that would tear the entire family apart. A war that would force everyone to choose sides, and a war that would end with consequences nobody could have predicted. Marcus's face turned red. The casual discomfort he had shown moments ago transformed into defensive anger, the kind of anger people display when they know they're in the wrong, but refuse to admit it. $4,000, he said, his voice rising. Are you insane? It's a bicycle, Sarah. It's a material object. You're going to destroy our family relationship over a bicycle? Sarah felt her mother's hand on her shoulder, a gentle pressure that was meant to be calming but felt like a betrayal. Sarah, honey, maybe we should all just take a breath here. Sarah shrugged off her mother's hand and focused entirely on Marcus. This isn't about a bicycle, Marcus. This is about your children destroying something that represented 6 months of sacrifice. This is about the fact that I gave up my first vacation in 4 years to buy my son something he earned through hard work and respect. And your children destroyed it in an afternoon because you refused to teach them that actions have consequences. They're just kids, Jennifer interjected, finally putting down her phone and joining the confrontation. They didn't understand how valuable it was. They were just being creative and playing. Dylan, who had been standing silently with tears still on his face, spoke up for the first time. I'm a kid too. I'm 16. When I was 8 years old, I knew not to destroy other people's property. When I was 10, I knew spray paint was permanent. When I was 12, I definitely knew better. This wasn't an accident. This was vandalism. Don't talk to my children like that, Jennifer snapped at Dylan, her voice sharp. Sarah stepped between Jennifer and her son, her protective instincts fully activated. Dylan has every right to point out that your children are old enough to know better. Ethan is 12 years old, Jennifer. 12. In some places, that's old enough to be charged with criminal vandalism. Don't you dare act like he's a toddler who doesn't understand actions and consequences. Marcus threw up his hands in exasperation. So what exactly do you expect me to do, Sarah? Write you a check for $4,000 right now? Yes, Sarah said simply. That's exactly what I expect. Your children destroyed a $4,000 bicycle. You are responsible for their actions. You replace it or pay for the damage. That's how this works. Marcus laughed, but it was a cruel, dismissive laugh. I'm not paying $4,000 for a bicycle. That's absurd. If you wanted something that expensive protected, you should have locked it up. Sarah felt her father step forward. Now wait just a minute, Robert began, but Marcus cut him off. No, Dad, I'm not doing this. Sarah has always been dramatic and overdramatic about everything. Remember when we were kids and I accidentally broke her doll and she wouldn't speak to me for a month? This is the same thing. She's holding a grudge over an object. I have 3 children to support. I'm not throwing away $4,000 because Sarah is too precious about her things. That doll was a gift from Grandma Rose before she died, Sarah said quietly, the old childhood wound suddenly fresh again. You didn't accidentally break it, Marcus. You took it out of my room because I wouldn't let you watch your TV show, and you smashed it against the wall. And Mom and Dad told me I needed to forgive you and move on because boys will be boys. I was 8 years old, and I learned that day that my feelings didn't matter and that you would never face consequences. And look at us now, 34 years later, and absolutely nothing has changed. Linda, Sarah's mother, made a small sound of protest. Sarah, that's not fair. We tried our best to raise you both right. Did you? Sarah asked, turning to her mother. Did you really? Because it looks to me like you raised one child to believe he was entitled to everything and another child to believe she had to accept being treated badly for the sake of family peace. The backyard had become a battlefield. Dylan had stepped back, uncomfortable with the escalating adult conflict. The 3 children responsible for everything were now sitting at the picnic table, eating the ice cream Jennifer had given them despite everything, watching the adults fight with detached curiosity. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Sarah his screen. It was a photo of a brand new silver SUV. You see this? I just bought this last month, $32,000. Do you know why I could afford it? Because I make good financial decisions. I prioritize my family's needs. I don't waste money on ridiculous luxury items like $4,000 bicycles. If you can't afford to have nice things destroyed, don't buy nice things. That's basic common sense. Sarah stared at her brother in disbelief. You just proved my point, Marcus. You have a $32,000 vehicle in your driveway right now. You clearly have money. But you're refusing to take responsibility for what your children did because you've never had to take responsibility for anything in your life. Marcus's jaw clenched. I'm done with this conversation. Kids, get in the car. We're leaving. You're just going to walk away, Sarah called after him as he gathered his children. You're not going to apologize. You're not going to discipline them. You're not going to teach them that what they did was wrong. Marcus turned back one final time. They're children, Sarah. They made a mistake. If you choose to hold a grudge and destroy our family relationship over this, that's on you, not me. Come on, Jennifer. Kids, let's go. The children climbed into their father's car without a word of apology. Jennifer gave Sarah a look of pure disdain as she passed. You've always thought you were better than everyone else, Sarah. Maybe this will teach you that the rest of us don't exist to worship at your altar of martyrdom. Within 5 minutes, Marcus's entire family was gone. The SUV pulled out of the driveway, leaving Sarah standing in her yard with her parents, her son, and the ruins of what should have been a beautiful family gathering. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Sarah, sweetheart, I understand you're upset, but Marcus has a point. It is a lot of money. Maybe we could all chip in and help get the bike repaired, take it to a shop, see what can be done. Dad, Sarah said tiredly, the fight draining out of her and leaving only exhaustion. They didn't just paint over it. The paint got into the gears, the brakes, the cables. Even if a shop could remove the paint without damaging the carbon fiber frame, which is unlikely, the internal damage would cost almost as much to repair as the bike cost originally. It's totaled. Linda wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture Sarah recognized from childhood as her mother's way of dealing with uncomfortable situations. Maybe Marcus is right, that you should have kept it somewhere more secure. You know how his children are. Sarah looked at her mother for a long moment. So this is my fault? Because I didn't predict that 3 children aged 8 to 12 would commit vandalism in my own garage during a family barbecue. Nobody's saying it's your fault, dear, Linda said quickly. But sometimes we have to choose our battles. Is a bicycle really worth tearing the family apart? And there it was. The same message Sarah had been receiving her entire life. Don't make waves. Don't cause problems. Accept being mistreated for the sake of family harmony. Forgive and move on. Your feelings matter less than keeping the peace. Sarah turned to her father. Dad, if someone at your job destroyed thousands of dollars of company equipment through intentional negligence, what would happen? They'd be fired, Robert admitted, probably prosecuted, and if someone crashed into your truck and caused $4,000 in damage, what would happen? Their insurance would pay for it, or I'd take them to court. So why, Sarah asked quietly, is my family held to a lower standard than strangers? Why am I expected to accept destruction of property from my own relatives that I would never accept from anyone else? Why does being related somehow mean they get to treat me worse than strangers would? Her parents had no answer. After an awkward silence, they made excuses about the long drive home and left within the hour. They hugged Dylan, told Sarah they loved her, and suggested that maybe she should call Marcus in a few days when everyone had calmed down. After they left, Sarah and Dylan were alone in the backyard. The remains of the barbecue were scattered across the table. The garage still held the destroyed bicycle. The sun was setting over the Denver skyline, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful on any other day. Dylan sat down at the picnic table and put his head in his hands. Mom, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I should have put the bike in my room. I should have been watching them. Sarah sat down next to her son and pulled him into a fierce hug. Dylan, listen to me very carefully. This is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. You had every right to expect that your property would be safe in your own home during a family gathering. You had every right to trust that children old enough to know better would not vandalize something that didn't belong to them. This is not on you. But your vacation, Dylan said, his voice breaking. You gave up your vacation for me, and now the bike is ruined, and we can't even get the money back. I didn't give up my vacation for a bike, Sarah said firmly. I gave it up for you, to show you that hard work and integrity matter, that loving someone means making sacrifices, that you are worth every single sacrifice I've ever made. And that lesson hasn't changed just because some people have no concept of respect or responsibility. They sat together in silence as the sky darkened. Inside the house, Sarah made a decision. She had spent her entire life being told to keep the peace, to forgive, to let things go. She had been conditioned to believe that maintaining family relationships meant accepting poor treatment. But sitting there with her son, looking at the ruins of her sacrifice, she realized something fundamental. Teaching Dylan to accept injustice for the sake of peace would be teaching him that he didn't deserve to be treated with respect. It would be teaching him that letting people walk all over you was somehow virtuous. It would be teaching him that consequences didn't matter and that people could hurt you without accountability. She wasn't going to teach him that. Not anymore. That night, after Dylan went to bed, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and began researching small claims court procedures in Colorado. If Marcus wouldn't do the right thing voluntarily, she would force him to do it legally. The war had just begun, and Sarah Mitchell was done backing down. The week following the barbecue brought a flood of phone calls, text messages, and social media drama that Sarah had never anticipated. She had filed her small claims court papers on Monday morning, seeking $4,200 in damages from Marcus for the destruction caused by his children. The filing fee was $186, money she could barely afford, but she paid it anyway. Marcus received the court summons on Wednesday, and by Wednesday evening, Sarah's phone was exploding. The first call came from her mother. "Sarah, honey, what have you done?" Marcus called us in tears. "He says you're suing him. Please tell me this isn't true." "It's absolutely true," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "He refused to take responsibility, so I'm holding him legally accountable. He has 30 days to either pay the damages or appear in court." Linda's voice rose in pitch. You're taking your own brother to court? Over a bicycle? Sarah, how could you? What would Grandma Rose think? What would your father's parents think? We don't sue family. We work things out. Mom, we tried working it out. I asked Marcus to replace the bike. He refused. He said it was my fault for not locking it up and that I'm being dramatic. What exactly did you expect me to do? Just accept a $4,000 loss and teach Dylan that it's okay for people to destroy our things without consequences. There was a long pause on the line. Your father and I think you're making a terrible mistake. This will destroy the family. Mom, Marcus destroyed something that took me 6 months of sacrifice to buy, and he's showing no remorse. He's acting like his children did nothing wrong. What kind of lesson does it teach them if there are no consequences? What kind of lesson does it teach Dylan? Linda's tone shifted to pleading. Can't you just let it go? We could all pitch in, help you buy Dylan something nice but less expensive. A nice $500 bike would be perfectly fine for what he needs. This isn't about the bike anymore, Sarah said firmly. This is about right and wrong. This is about accountability. And this is about me finally standing up for myself and my son, instead of always being the one who has to sacrifice for the sake of peace. Linda hung up shortly after, and Sarah could hear her father's voice in the background, telling Linda to let Sarah cool down, that she'd come to her senses eventually. The next call came from Marcus himself, and it was explosive. You're really doing this, he yelled into the phone without even greeting her. You're actually suing me, your own brother, over a stupid bicycle. Yes, Sarah said calmly. I'm doing this. You realize this makes you look insane, right? I've already told everyone in the family what you're doing. Do you know what they're saying? They're saying you've lost your mind. They're saying you're vindictive and petty. They're saying you care more about money than family. Who's everyone? Sarah asked. Who exactly are you telling? Mom and Dad, obviously. Aunt Christine, Uncle Paul, Cousin David and Melissa. Pretty much everyone. And you know what? They all agree with me. They all think you're way out of line. Sarah felt a chill run through her. Marcus was doing exactly what she feared he would do. He was controlling the narrative, getting to everyone first, framing himself as the victim of his unreasonable sister. It was a tactic he had perfected in childhood, running to their parents with his version of events before Sarah could defend herself. Let me guess, Sarah said. You told them I'm suing you over a bike, but you left out the part where your children committed intentional vandalism. You left out the part where I sacrificed my vacation to buy it. You left out the part where you refused to take any responsibility, even though you clearly have the money to pay for it. Did you mention any of that, Marcus? The details don't matter, Marcus shot back. The point is, you're suing family. That's unforgivable. You've crossed a line you can't come back from. Your children crossed a line when they destroyed $4,000 worth of property, Sarah replied. You crossed a line when you refused to do anything about it. I'm just holding you accountable. Marcus's voice dropped to something cold and threatening. Fine. You want to play this game? We'll play. But when you end up alone, because you've alienated everyone who ever loved you, don't come crying to me, and don't think you're ever seeing my kids again. You're out of their lives. Permanently. He hung up before Sarah could respond. Over the next few days, the calls continued. Aunt Christine, their father's sister, left a voicemail expressing disappointment in Sarah's choices. She used words like petty and materialistic and suggested that Sarah was setting a bad example for Dylan about the importance of forgiveness. Cousin David sent a long text message explaining that while he sympathized with Sarah's situation, family was more important than money, and perhaps she should consider what really mattered in life. Cousin Melissa was more direct. Her text simply read, I can't believe you're doing this to Marcus. He doesn't deserve this. You've always been jealous of him, and now you're showing your true colors. But there were surprises too. Sarah's Aunt Helen, Her mother's younger sister, who had always been the black sheep of the family for getting divorced twice and pursuing an art career, called with a very different message. "Sarah, I just heard what happened from your mother, and I want you to know I'm on your side. Your brother has been a spoiled brat his entire life, and it's about time someone held him accountable. Don't you dare back down." Sarah found herself crying with relief. "Thank you, Aunt Helen. I was starting to think I was crazy." "You're not crazy, honey. You're just finally done being a doormat. I wish I'd learned that lesson earlier in my life. It would have saved me years of misery. Stand your ground. Those kids need to learn that actions have consequences, and so does their father." Sarah's best friend from college, Monica, who lived in California but kept in touch regularly, had an even stronger reaction when she heard the story. "Girl, sue him into next week. I remember you telling me stories about your brother when we were roommates. He's always been an entitled jerk. Don't you dare let him or your parents guilt you into backing down." The most painful call came from Sarah's father on Friday evening. Robert's voice was tired and sad. "Sarah, your mother is beside herself. She's been crying for 3 days. This whole situation is causing her so much stress that her blood pressure is through the roof. Do you really want to be responsible for making your mother sick?" Sarah felt the familiar guilt wash over her, the same guilt she had felt her entire life when she was made to feel responsible for everyone else's emotional state. But this time, something in her resisted. "Dad, I love you and Mom, but I'm not responsible for Mom's blood pressure." Marcus's children destroyed something valuable that belonged to Dylan. Marcus refused to take responsibility. Those are the facts. If Mom is upset, she should be upset at Marcus for creating this situation, not at me for trying to resolve it. "You know your mother can't handle conflict," Robert said quietly. "This is tearing her apart." "Then maybe," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly, "she should tell Marcus to do the right thing instead of telling me to accept being wronged. Maybe she should use some of that stress and anxiety to pressure the person who actually caused this situation instead of the person who's trying to fix it." Robert sighed heavily. "You sound just like your Aunt Helen. Stubborn as a mule. Is that really such a bad thing, Dad? Being stubborn about being treated with respect? I'm not saying you're wrong about what happened, Sarah. I'm saying you need to ask yourself if this is worth it. Is being right worth losing your family?" And there was the question that Sarah had been grappling with since she filed the lawsuit. Was it worth it? Was she really prepared to lose relationships with her parents, her brother, cousins, aunts and uncles over this? But every time she started to doubt herself, she would look at Dylan. She would remember the look on his face when he saw his destroyed bike. She would think about all those double shifts, all those exhausting evenings, standing behind a retail counter, all those sacrifices made out of love. And she would think about what message she would be sending her son if she backed down now. She would be teaching him that family could abuse you, take advantage of you, destroy your property, and face no consequences. She would be teaching him that keeping the peace was more important than being treated with dignity. She would be teaching him to be a doormat, just like she had been taught. She couldn't do it. She wouldn't do it. "Dad, I love you, but I'm not dropping this lawsuit. If that costs me my family, then I guess I'll find out who really cared about me in the first place." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother and I won't be attending Dylan's graduation next month if this lawsuit is still pending. We can't be seen supporting this behavior." Dylan's graduation. Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Her son was graduating high school with a 4.0 average and multiple scholarship offers. It was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of her life, and her parents were threatening to miss it because she dared to hold Marcus accountable. "That's your choice, Dad," Sarah managed to say, though her voice was thick with tears. "But it's a choice that will tell Dylan and me exactly where we stand in your priorities." After Robert hung up, Sarah sat in her kitchen and cried harder than she had cried in years. Not just for the bike, not just for the money, but for the realization that her family's love was apparently conditional. It was based on her being compliant, on accepting poor treatment, on always being the bigger person, which really just meant being the person who absorbed the damage so everyone else could stay comfortable. Dylan found her there an hour later, her eyes red and swollen. He sat down next to her without a word and just held her hand. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, if you want to drop the lawsuit, I'll understand. I don't want you to lose your family over this. The bike doesn't matter that much." Sarah squeezed her son's hand. "Dylan, look at me. This isn't about the bike anymore. This is about teaching you something important. Standing up for yourself will sometimes cost you relationships. People who benefit from you not having boundaries will be furious when you finally set them. But you have to do it anyway, because your self-respect matters more than their comfort. Do you understand?" Dylan nodded slowly. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Sarah admitted, "but I'm more scared of teaching you to accept being mistreated." In the following weeks, the family drama intensified. A WhatsApp family group chat that Sarah had been part of for years suddenly went silent whenever she posted anything. She later found out through Aunt Helen that Marcus had created a new family group chat that excluded her and spent time there portraying himself as the victim of his vindictive sister. Several cousins unfriended her on social media. Her mother stopped answering her calls. Her father would only communicate through brief, formal text messages about practical matters. But there were unexpected allies too. Dylan's girlfriend Emma, a smart and outspoken 17-year-old, told her own parents about the situation. Emma's father, a lawyer, reached out to Sarah and offered advice on her small claims case pro bono. He helped her gather evidence, take photographs of the damaged bike, document the costs, and prepare her statement for court. Tom, the bike shop owner, provided a written assessment of the damage and the bike's value. He also wrote a statement describing Sarah's sacrifices to afford the bike in the first place. When Sarah tried to pay him for his time, he refused. "Some things are more important than money, Mrs. Mitchell, like teaching kids that they can't destroy other people's property without consequences." Sarah's colleagues at work, when they heard what happened, were almost universally supportive. Several shared their own stories of family members who never faced consequences for bad behavior and how it had poisoned their relationships. But the support from outside the family only highlighted how little support she was receiving from within it. 3 weeks before the court date, Marcus's lawyer sent Sarah a letter. It was a formal demand that she drop the lawsuit, along with thinly veiled threats about countersuing for harassment and emotional distress. The letter claimed that Sarah was using the legal system to bully her brother and his innocent children, and that her actions constituted a form of family abuse. Sarah showed the letter to Emma's father, who laughed out loud. "This is pure intimidation, with no legal merit whatsoever. Don't let it scare you. Marcus is desperate because he knows he's going to lose in court. The facts are entirely on your side." Sarah wasn't scared by the legal threats, but she was scared by what she discovered next. Through a mutual friend, she learned that Marcus had been telling people that Sarah was mentally unstable, that she had always been jealous of his success, and that this lawsuit was really about her trying to punish him for having a happy family while she was divorced and struggling. The smear campaign was working. People who had known Sarah for years were starting to question her judgment. She overheard a conversation at church where 2 women were discussing the situation, and one said, "Well, you know how single mothers can be. They get so stressed that they sometimes lash out inappropriately." Sarah stopped attending that church. The isolation was profound. Sarah had spent her entire life being part of a large, extended family. There had always been birthday parties, holiday gatherings, group texts about family news. Now there was silence. She was being systematically cut out, one relationship at a time. Dylan was affected too. His cousins blocked him on social media. His grandmother, who had always sent him $20 for good report cards, sent nothing when his final high school transcript arrived showing perfect grades. When Dylan tried calling her, Linda told him she loved him but couldn't talk to him while his mother was attacking Uncle Marcus. But something unexpected happened through all of this. Sarah and Dylan grew closer. They had long conversations about family dynamics, about standing up for yourself, about the cost of integrity. They talked about boundaries and self-respect in ways that most parents never get to discuss with their children. Dylan told his mother something that stayed with her. "Mom, I used to think family was everything, that you had to forgive family no matter what. But watching this situation, I realize that's not true. Family is only valuable if they treat you with respect. Otherwise, they're just people who share your DNA and make your life harder. I'm proud of you for standing up for us." 2 weeks before the court date, Sarah received a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. It was Jennifer, Marcus's wife. Her voice was shaking. "Sarah, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me for coffee, please?" Without Marcus knowing, Sarah was suspicious, but her curiosity won out. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop in a neighborhood between their two homes, somewhere neither of them usually went. Jennifer looked terrible when she arrived. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, she wasn't wearing makeup, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She ordered a coffee with trembling hands and sat down across from Sarah. "I don't know how to say this," Jennifer began, "so I'm just going to say it. You're right about everything. The kids did destroy Dylan's bike. They knew exactly what they were doing, and Marcus is refusing to do anything about it because he's never had to face consequences for anything in his life, and he's raising our children the same way." Sarah was stunned into silence. Jennifer continued, her words coming faster now. "Ethan was suspended from school again last week. He got into a fight with another student and broke the kid's nose. The school is threatening expulsion. Olivia was caught shoplifting at Target. Lucas destroyed a neighbor's mailbox with a baseball bat, and the neighbors are threatening to call the police. Our kids are out of control, Sarah, and it's because Marcus and I have never disciplined them properly. We've always made excuses. And now I'm watching them turn into people I don't even like." Tears were streaming down Jennifer's face. "Marcus is furious at me for even calling you. He says I'm betraying the family, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. You were right to file that lawsuit. Those kids needed to see that what they did was serious. And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for how we've treated you and Dylan." Sarah didn't know what to say. She had spent weeks being demonized by Jennifer and Marcus, and now Jennifer was sitting across from her, crying and apologizing. Part of Sarah wanted to feel vindicated. Part of her just felt sad for the whole situation. "What are you going to do?" Sarah finally asked. Jennifer wiped her eyes with a napkin. "I don't know. Marcus won't listen to me about the kids. He thinks I'm being too hard on them. But Ethan is 12 and violent, Olivia is 10 and stealing, Lucas is 8 and destroying property. If we don't change something now, what are they going to be like at 16? I'm terrified, Sarah. I'm genuinely terrified of what kind of people they're becoming. Are you going to testify in court?" Sarah asked quietly. Jennifer shook her head. "I can't. Marcus would divorce me. But I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know that you're not crazy. You're not vindictive. You're just a mother protecting her son and trying to teach a lesson that someone needed to teach." The two women sat in silence for a moment. Then Jennifer stood up. "I have to go. Marcus thinks I'm at the grocery store, but Sarah, please know that I support what you're doing, even if I can't say it publicly, and I hope you win." After Jennifer left, Sarah sat alone in the coffee shop for a long time, staring at her now cold coffee. The situation was even worse than she had realized. Marcus's children weren't just spoiled, they were on a dangerous path, and their parents were too blind or too stubborn to see it. The court date was now just 12 days away. Sarah had all her evidence prepared. She had photographs of the destroyed bike. She had receipts showing what she had paid. She had Tom's written assessment. She had testimony about the children being unsupervised. She had everything she needed to win. But winning in court wouldn't restore her family relationships. It wouldn't make her parents come to Dylan's graduation. It wouldn't undo the months of stress and isolation. It wouldn't erase the painful realization that her family's love had always been conditional on her compliance. Sarah went home that evening and found Dylan working on college scholarship applications. He looked up when she entered and smiled, that genuine warm smile that reminded her why she was doing all of this. "How was your day, Mom?" "Complicated," Sarah said, "but I'm okay." Because that was the truth. She was okay. Bruised, hurt, disappointed, but fundamentally okay. She had her son, her integrity and her self-respect, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The morning of the court date arrived with typical Colorado unpredictability. Heavy clouds threatened rain, and the temperature had dropped 15 degrees overnight. Sarah dressed carefully in a conservative navy blazer and grey slacks, professional but not ostentatious. Dylan wore his debate team suit, and despite Sarah's insistence that he could stay home, he refused. "I want to be there," he said firmly. "For you." The courthouse was a modern building in downtown Denver, all glass and steel that reflected the grey sky. Sarah's stomach churned as they walked through security. Emma's father, Michael, met them in the lobby. He had taken time off from his own law practice to accompany Sarah as moral support, though he couldn't officially represent her in small claims court. "Remember," he said quietly as they rode the elevator to the 4th floor, "stick to the facts. Don't get emotional. Don't let Marcus provoke you. The evidence is on your side. The law is on your side. Just stay calm and tell the truth." They entered the courtroom at 8:45. The room was smaller than Sarah had expected from television shows, with simple wooden benches and fluorescent lighting. A few other people sat waiting for their own cases to be called. Sarah, Dylan, and Michael took seats near the front. At 8:55, Marcus arrived with his own lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit who carried a leather briefcase. Marcus was dressed impeccably in a 3-piece suit that Sarah knew cost more than she made in a month. He didn't look at Sarah or Dylan as he sat down on the opposite side of the room. Jennifer was not with him. Neither were the children. Neither were Sarah's parents. The judge entered at 9 o'clock sharp. Judge Patricia Morrison was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a bun and glasses perched on her nose. She had a reputation, Michael had told Sarah, for being no-nonsense and fair. "Case number 23-4789, Mitchell versus Mitchell," Judge Morrison called out. Both parties approach. Sarah and Marcus stood at opposite sides of a central podium. His lawyer stood slightly behind him. Michael gave Sarah's shoulder a quick squeeze of support before she walked forward. "This is a claim for property damage," Judge Morrison said, reviewing the file. "Ms. Mitchell, you're claiming $4,200 in damages. Mr. Mitchell, you're contesting this claim. Ms. Mitchell, please present your case." Sarah took a deep breath and began. Her voice was steady despite her pounding heart. She explained the situation clearly and concisely. She described the 6 months of work it had taken to save for the bike. She described the barbecue and the circumstances of the damage. She presented photographs of the destroyed bicycle. She presented the receipt showing the purchase price. She presented Tom's written assessment of the damage. The bike was destroyed beyond repair, Sarah concluded. The spray paint penetrated the mechanical components. Even if the exterior could be restored, which is unlikely without damaging the carbon fiber frame, the internal damage makes it unsafe to ride. The total loss is $4,200. Judge Morrison examined the photographs carefully. And you're claiming that Mr. Mitchell's children caused this damage? Yes, Your Honor. His 3 children, ages 12, 10, and 8, were at my home for a family barbecue. They went into my garage without supervision and used spray paint that was stored there to vandalize my son's bicycle. Were you present when this occurred? No, Your Honor. I was in the backyard with other adults. The children were unsupervised for approximately 45 minutes to an hour. Judge Morrison turned to Marcus. Mr. Mitchell, do you dispute that your children caused this damage? Marcus's lawyer stepped forward. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that his children may have interacted with the bicycle, but the characterization of their behavior as vandalism is inflammatory and inaccurate. They are young children who saw paint and a bike and engaged in what they thought was harmless decoration. They had no concept of the bicycle's value or that they were doing anything wrong. They're 12, 10, and 8 years old, Judge Morrison said dryly. Are you suggesting they didn't know that spray painting someone else's property without permission was inappropriate? The lawyer shifted slightly. Your Honor, children's cognitive development varies greatly. These particular children are very creative and spontaneous. They didn't have malicious intent. Intent isn't really the issue here, Judge Morrison said. The issue is responsibility. Mr. Mitchell, are you denying that your children damaged this bicycle? Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice tight. Your Honor, I'm not denying that my kids painted the bike. What I'm saying is that my sister is being unreasonable. She left an extremely expensive item in an unlocked garage during a family gathering where she knew children would be present. She bears some responsibility for not securing it properly. Sarah felt anger flare in her chest, but remembered Michael's advice. She stayed quiet and let the judge respond. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and looked at Marcus directly. Mr. Mitchell, are you suggesting that people should lock up their property in their own homes during family gatherings because they can't trust their relatives' children not to destroy things? That's not what I'm saying, Marcus protested. I'm saying that if something is that valuable and that precious, basic common sense suggests keeping it secure. I see. Judge Morrison made a note. So in your view, the fault lies with Ms. Mitchell for not anticipating that her nieces and nephew would commit vandalism. Marcus's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, my client is simply pointing out contributory factors. Furthermore, the amount claimed is excessive. $4,000 for a bicycle is unreasonable. Ms. Mitchell made a poor financial decision, and now she wants to hold my client responsible for that decision. Judge Morrison picked up one of the photographs. This appears to be a Trek full suspension mountain bike with a carbon frame. I actually bike myself, and I can tell you that $4,000 is not at all unreasonable for a bike of this caliber. These are professional-grade machines, so that argument holds no water with me. Next point? The lawyer shuffled her papers. Your Honor, this lawsuit is really about a family dispute. Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell have a long history of conflict. This is being used as a weapon in an ongoing family drama. The appropriate venue for resolution would be family mediation, not a court of law. Ms. Mitchell, Judge Morrison asked, have you attempted to resolve this outside of court? Yes, Your Honor. I asked Mr. Mitchell directly to either replace the bicycle or pay for the damages. He refused. I asked him to at least discipline his children and acknowledge what they did was wrong. He refused. I exhausted all reasonable options before filing this claim. Mr. Mitchell, why did you refuse to pay for the damages? Marcus's composure cracked slightly. Because she's my sister, and she should understand that kids make mistakes. She's being vindictive, and trying to punish me financially because she's always resented my success. This isn't about the bike. This is about her being jealous and bitter. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Morrison said sharply, I'm going to advise you to stick to the facts of the case and leave the amateur psychology out of my courtroom. Your sister is asking for compensation for property that your children destroyed. Whether she resents your success is completely irrelevant. Do you dispute that your children destroyed the bicycle? No, but do you dispute that the bicycle was worth approximately $4,000? It seems excessive, but do you dispute that you have a legal responsibility as a parent for your minor children's destructive actions? Marcus was quiet for a moment. His lawyer whispered something to him. Finally, he spoke. No, Your Honor, but I think the amount should be reduced due to her contributory negligence. Judge Morrison sat back in her chair. Let me make sure I understand your position, Mr. Mitchell. Your children went into your sister's garage, found spray paint, and systematically painted over a $4,000 bicycle. Your sister is at fault for not locking her garage during a family barbecue. And you believe you should pay little to nothing because this is all part of a family dispute where your sister is jealous of you. Is that accurate? When put that way, even Marcus seemed to realize how bad it sounded. Your Honor, I just think this could have been avoided if your children had been properly supervised, Judge Morrison interrupted. If your children had been taught not to destroy other people's property, if you had taken responsibility when it happened and offered to make it right. Those are the ways this could have been avoided, Mr. Mitchell. None of them involve your sister doing anything different. She looked down at her notes, then back up at both parties. I'm going to take a 15-minute recess to review the evidence. Both parties remain available. The judge left through a side door. Sarah felt her legs shaking and sat down heavily on the bench. Michael gave her a thumbs up. That went well, he whispered. She's clearly on your side. Marcus and his lawyer conversed intensely in whispers. Sarah could see Marcus's face getting redder. At one point, his lawyer shook her head firmly at something he said. The 15 minutes felt like hours. Finally, Judge Morrison returned, and everyone stood. I've reviewed the evidence presented, she began. This is actually a fairly straightforward case despite the family drama surrounding it. Ms. Mitchell purchased a bicycle for $4,200. She has provided a receipt proving this purchase. The bicycle was destroyed by Mr. Mitchell's minor children while on Ms. Mitchell's property. Mr. Mitchell, as the parent of minor children, is legally responsible for their destructive actions. Mr. Mitchell has argued that Ms. Mitchell bears some fault for not securing the bicycle. I find this argument without merit. People have a reasonable expectation that their property will not be vandalized in their own homes, even during family gatherings. The children in question are 12, 10, and 8 years old, well beyond the age where they should understand basic respect for other people's belongings. Mr. Mitchell has also argued that the amount is excessive. The evidence clearly shows that this was a high-end bicycle appropriate for serious mountain biking, and the price paid was reasonable for such equipment. The photographs show extensive damage that renders the bicycle unusable and unrepairable. Therefore, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Sarah Mitchell. Mr. Marcus Mitchell is ordered to pay $4,200 in damages, plus court costs of $186, for a total of $4,386. Payment must be made within 30 days. Mr. Mitchell, you have the right to appeal this decision within 30 days if you choose to do so. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. Next case. It was over, just like that. Sarah had won. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his face pale with shock and anger. His lawyer was already packing her briefcase and explaining something to him in low tones. He turned and looked at Sarah, and the expression on his face was pure hatred. "You just destroyed this family," he said quietly but clearly. "I hope you're happy." Then he walked out of the courtroom without another word. Dylan hugged his mother tightly. "You did it, Mum. You won." Sarah felt tears sliding down her face, but they weren't tears of happiness. They were tears of exhaustion, relief, grief, and a strange sense of loss. Yes, she had won. But what exactly had she won? Michael shook her hand warmly. "You stood up for yourself and taught your son an important lesson. That's worth more than any amount of money." Outside the courthouse, the rain had started, a light drizzle that matched Sarah's mood. Dylan opened an umbrella and held it over both of them as they walked to the car. "Mom," he said carefully, "are you okay? You don't seem happy." Sarah stopped walking and looked at her son. "I am happy that justice was served. I am happy that you got to see that standing up for yourself matters. But I'm also sad, Dylan. I'm sad that it had to come to this. I'm sad that my brother cares more about being right than doing right. I'm sad that our family chose sides instead of choosing what was fair. Winning in court doesn't take away that sadness." Dylan squeezed her shoulder. "But you did the right thing. That has to count for something. It counts for everything," Sarah said softly. "Even when doing the right thing costs you." The 30 days that followed the court verdict brought unexpected developments. Marcus did not pay. The deadline came and went with no check, no contact, no acknowledgement. Sarah's lawyer helped her file for enforcement, which would eventually lead to wage garnishment if Marcus continued to refuse payment. But something else happened during those 30 days, something Sarah never saw coming. Dylan's graduation arrived. It was a beautiful June evening, the kind Colorado is famous for, with clear skies and perfect temperatures. The ceremony was held outdoors at the high school stadium, with rows of white chairs set up on the football field and families filling the bleachers. Sarah sat in the bleachers with Michael and his family, who had graciously invited her to sit with them. Emma sat on Dylan's other side, beaming with pride for her boyfriend. Sarah's parents were not there. Marcus was not there. Most of her extended family was not there. But Aunt Helen was there. She sat next to Sarah and held her hand through the entire ceremony. When Dylan's name was called and he walked across the stage with his perfect 4.0 grade average and multiple scholarship announcements, Aunt Helen stood up and cheered louder than anyone else in the stadium. Sarah cried, but this time they were tears of pride. Her son had accomplished something extraordinary despite all the family drama swirling around him. He had maintained his focus, his integrity, and his kindness through it all. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebrations, Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. Her mother, Linda, was standing near the parking lot, partially hidden behind someone's car, watching from a distance. When their eyes met, Linda looked away quickly and hurried toward her own vehicle. Sarah made a split-second decision. She ran after her mother, catching up just as Linda reached her car. "Mom, wait, please." Linda turned, her eyes red and swollen. Sarah could see that she had been crying. "I shouldn't have come," Linda said quietly. "Your father doesn't know I'm here. But I couldn't miss Dylan's graduation. I just couldn't. Mom, why are you standing in the parking lot? Why didn't you sit with us?" Linda's face crumpled. "Because I'm ashamed, Sarah. I'm so ashamed of how your father and I have handled this. We took Marcus's side because it was easier. Because we've always taken his side. Because we taught him that he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. And we taught you that your job was to accept it and keep the peace. And watching you stand up for yourself and for Dylan made me realize what terrible parents we've been to you." Sarah felt tears streaming down her own face now. "Mom, Let me finish," Linda interrupted. "After the court case, I started really looking at Marcus's children, at how they behave, at how they treat people. And I realized they're becoming bullies, Sarah. Just like Marcus was a bully to you when you were kids, and we let it happen. We let it happen then, and we're letting it happen now with his children. And I'm terrified of what kind of adults they're going to become if nobody stops them." Linda wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Your father won't admit we were wrong. He can't. His pride won't let him. But I'm here to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were right to stand up to Marcus. You were right to go to court. You were right about everything, and I'm proud of you, even though I haven't shown it." The two women stood in the parking lot, separated by months of hurt and years of dysfunctional patterns, and in that moment, something shifted. Sarah reached out and hugged her mother, and Linda hugged her back fiercely. "I want to be part of your life again," Linda whispered. "I want to be a real grandmother to Dylan, and I want to do better. I don't know if your father will come around, but I'm here if you'll have me." "Of course, Mom," Sarah said. "Of course I'll have you." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, while the graduation celebration continued in the stadium behind them. 2 months later, in August, Sarah received an unexpected email. It was from Jennifer. The subject line read, "Update and apology." The email was long and detailed. Jennifer explained that she had finally convinced Marcus to attend family therapy with her and the children. The therapist had been blunt about the children's behavioral problems and the parents' enabling. Marcus had initially resisted, but had gradually begun to see the truth of the situation. Ethan had been enrolled in a behavioral program for troubled youth. Olivia was seeing a therapist specializing in childhood kleptomania and impulse control. Lucas was in anger management classes designed for children. Jennifer wrote that Marcus still hadn't paid Sarah the court-ordered amount, and probably never would out of sheer stubbornness. But she wanted Sarah to know that the incident had been a wake-up call. The children were slowly improving. They had written apology letters to Dylan, which Jennifer attached to the email. They were sincere, childish, misspelled, but sincere. Jennifer ended the email with a personal note. "You did what I didn't have the courage to do. You set a boundary and enforced it, even when it cost you everything. My children needed that. They needed to see that actions have consequences. I don't know if you'll ever forgive us, but I want you to know that what happened changed our family, hopefully for the better." Sarah forwarded the email to Dylan, who read it in silence. Then he looked up at his mother and said, "Does this change anything for you?" Sarah thought about it carefully. "No," she said finally. "I'm glad their children are getting help. I'm glad Jennifer is trying, but Marcus still hasn't taken responsibility. He still hasn't paid. He still hasn't genuinely apologized, and I've learned that I can't control other people's growth. I can only control my own boundaries and my own choices." "Fair enough," Dylan said. That fall, Dylan started college on a full scholarship at the University of Colorado Boulder. He planned to major in environmental science. Sarah helped him move into his dorm room, and as they stood in the parking lot saying goodbye, Dylan handed her an envelope. "Don't open this until you get home," he said. In the car on the drive back to Denver, Sarah pulled over at a rest stop and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Dylan's careful handwriting. "Mom," it read, "this year has been the hardest year of our lives, but it's also been the most important. You taught me that integrity matters more than comfort, that standing up for what's right matters more than keeping the peace, that self-respect is not negotiable. These lessons will shape the rest of my life. The bike is gone, but what you gave me by fighting for it is priceless. You gave me a model of courage. You showed me that love sometimes means fighting battles, not avoiding them. You proved that a person's character is revealed not by how they act when everything is easy, but by what they do when standing up for themselves costs them everything. I'm proud to be your son, and someday when I have children of my own, I'll teach them the same lessons you taught me, not because of what you said, but because of what you did. Thank you for being the kind of mother who cares more about raising a strong son than about being liked by people who don't deserve your effort. I love you. Sarah sat in her car at the rest stop and cried until she had no tears left. Then she drove home, made herself a cup of tea, and sat on her back porch, watching the sun set over the Denver skyline. Her phone rang. It was Aunt Helen. "How are you doing, honey?" "I'm okay," Sarah said. "Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm at peace." "That's all any of us can ask for," Helen said warmly. "You did good, Sarah. You did really, really good." As the sun dipped below the mountains and the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Sarah reflected on everything that had happened. She had lost relationships, yes. Her brother might never speak to her again. Her father was still distant and disapproving. Large portions of her extended family still saw her as the villain of the story. But she had gained something too. She had gained her self-respect. She had gained her son's respect. She had gained the knowledge that she could stand up for herself even when it was terrifying to do so. She had gained her mother back. She had discovered who her real allies were, and perhaps most importantly, she had broken a generational cycle. She had refused to teach her son that being family meant accepting abuse. She had shown him that love without respect is not really love at all. She had demonstrated that boundaries are not selfish, they're necessary. The $4,200 would probably never be repaid. Marcus's pride wouldn't allow it. But the lesson was worth far more than money, and Sarah had never been someone who made decisions based on what was easy. She made them based on what was right. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah made a decision. She opened her laptop and started writing. She wrote about family dynamics, about boundaries, about the cost of integrity. She wrote about her experience, not with bitterness but with honesty and clarity. Maybe, she thought, her story could help someone else who was struggling with similar issues, someone else who was being told to keep the peace at the expense of their own dignity, someone else who needed permission to stand up for themselves even when their family called them selfish for it. Sarah Mitchell had set out to teach her brother a lesson about accountability. Instead, she had learned her own lessons about courage, self-worth, and the true meaning of family. Sometimes family is the people you're related to, but sometimes family is the people who stand beside you when standing up for yourself costs you everything else. And as Sarah wrote into the night, she realized that she had finally, after 42 years, learned to be her own advocate, to be her own defender, to be her own hero. The bike was gone, but Sarah had found something far more valuable. She had found herself. This is a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family dynamics, accountability, and the cost of standing up for what's right. Sarah Mitchell lost relationships, endured months of isolation and judgment, and was painted as the villain by many people who should have supported her. But she gained something invaluable, her self-respect and her son's respect. The question this story leaves us with is profound and personal. Would you have done what Sarah did? Would you have taken your own brother to court over destroyed property, knowing it would tear your family apart? Or would you have swallowed the loss, accepted the injustice, and moved on for the sake of keeping the peace? There's no universal right answer, because every family dynamic is different. But Sarah's story raises important questions about where we draw the line, about when forgiveness becomes enabling, about when family loyalty becomes self-destruction, about teaching the next generation that actions have consequences, even when those actions come from people we love. What strikes at the heart of this story is not the money or the bicycle. It's the principle. It's the idea that we teach people how to treat us, and sometimes teaching that lesson costs us dearly. Sarah paid a high price for her integrity, but she also demonstrated to her son that self-respect is not negotiable, that boundaries matter, and that love without respect is hollow. So we leave you with this question. In your own life, where do you draw the line? What would you be willing to sacrifice to stand up for what's right? And when family asks you to accept poor treatment for the sake of harmony, what will you choose, peace or self-respect? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us if you support Sarah's decision or if you think she went too far. Share your own experiences with family boundaries and accountability. This is not just Sarah's story, it's a story that touches something universal about human relationships and the courage it takes to demand better. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to see more real-life stories that challenge, inspire, and make you think. And don't miss the next recommended video, where we explore another powerful story about family, loyalty, and the difficult choices we all face when the people we love let us down. Thank you for listening to Sarah's story. May it give you courage in your own life to stand up for yourself, even when standing up means standing alone.